Welcome to episode 386 of the DFO Rundown, as always brought to you by Bet365, where if you were betting comebacks last night, you were loving it. All the action, all the fun. It's never ordinary at Bet365. Of course, we'll talk Stars, third period comeback on the Oilers. We might even slide in a little NBA because the Indiana Pacers, man, record-breaking comeback. We'll talk about that. We got some Brendan Shanahan news, which is the start maybe of a changing of the guard in Toronto. Talk a little Panthers and Hurricanes as well, and a few other off-the-cuff stuff as we welcome in Frank Seravalli. I'm Jason Gregor. And Frank, I guess let's start with the news that the Maple Leafs have granted the Islanders permission to talk to Brendan Shanahan, whose contract expires at the end of June. To me, I read that as you got a guy who's expiring contract and give him permission to talk to someone else. This is just like a polite way of we're separating.
I wouldn't go that far yet. I think Thursday today is a big day for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment has a board meeting, and they're expected to dive into exactly this discussion. Now, it's interesting. Yeah, like if you're planning on keeping him, wouldn't you deny permission? I think everyone's curious to see what happens next. Where does Brendan Shanahan's interest lie? And my understanding is that his preference, if it's on the table, is to stay in Toronto. He apparently feels like there's unfinished business, which is totally understandable, and would like to have an opportunity to come back and finish off the job. And whether or not that happens is going to be up to the MLSE board today, and new CEO Keith Pelly will have a huge say in that process of what happens next, as this is a totally changing dynamic in Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. Remember what happened previously. Bell sold off their shares, and Larry Tannenbaum sold off his shares. So Rogers is the 100% sole owner of Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment moving forward. It's not the same as it used to be. So we'll see what happens.
What I look at it and you see that, they did win a series, so that's progress. Unfortunately, they're core guys, and so when you've overseen everything, I look at it, and if you truly want to stay somewhere, what's the benefit of interviewing? I guess it's to cover your back in case they don't want you back. Maybe it's to see if the grass is greener or just the opportunity is different. What's the role going to be? I guess I understand it. To me, though, if you really wanted to keep someone, you wouldn't give them the opportunity to see if the grass is greener.
Right. And I think Keith Pelly had made it very clear that this is a results-oriented business and that they wanted to see results finally from the Leafs. I think it's a really complicated legacy and tenure for Brendan Shanahan if he's out the door. I mean, think about what the Leafs were like before he got there. They were a laughingstock. Remember the end of the Phil Kessel era, how that all played out, the different coaches that they had run through in recent years, the lack of success, not making the playoffs for forever, being a lottery team. I mean, from basically the start of the salary cap era until he got there, no one even took the Leafs seriously. And I think he did a great job in restoring a lot of facets to the Leafs that made them put a competitive environment in place to be able to go out and have 100-point seasons on the regular. In the end, yes, is he the guy at the top of the organization that's presided over multiple general managers, from Lou Lamoriello to Kyle Dubas to Brad Treliving? Of course. And then a number of different coaches along the way? Yes. But, and does he ultimately sign off on the core four continuing to return for 9 consecutive playoff runs, despite the same story over and over and over again? Ultimately, yes, the buck does stop with him. But he also wasn't on the ice. That's the other part about this that I try and wrestle with is should his head be on the chopping block because he signed off on these things, or is it on the players for not getting it done? I mean, ultimately, the people at the top always wear and bear the brunt of what happens on the ice, and understandably so. When you have jerseys being launched on the ice in game 7 when your team has rolled over twice on home ice, that's a significant turning point, I would think, for the organization. But I think, is it fair for me to say that it's complicated? Because there was a lot of good that happened that gets wiped away with playoff failures.
Well, I think, to me, you would look at all these other things, and at the end of the day, the playoff failure came back to always the same reason, and they never changed that. So that to me is that, yes, they made progress. You're wholeheartedly accurate on that. But at the end of the day, they never took the step forward in the playoffs with having the exact same 4 guys as their main leaders of the team. I don't think there's any debate on who the main leaders of the core are, the guys who get paid the most, the guys who play the most. And when push came to shove, they didn't shove back hard enough.
I think that's totally fair.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting. Like, if you're the Islanders, how hard do you think you pursue? Is Shanahan the obvious number 1 choice for them?
I don't have a real strong read yet of what he wants to do. I mean, remember where he came from. This was not necessarily a typical path. He worked at the league in the Department of Player Safety and overhauled that. There had been rumblings, if Brendan Shanahan is not returning to the Leafs, is there some position at the league that he would take? I don't know what he wants to do next. But the Islanders they've got a ton of work to do. It's basically like starting over again with where the Leafs were when he got there. Except with a lot less cachet and a lot less money.
Yeah, no, that's true. So it is. It'll be an interesting offseason for them. I think it's a start.
Oh, I should add in too. And he's been the highest paid executive in the league. I believe Brendan Shanahan's been making $7 million a year the last number of years.
Well, you're in Toronto. They got a boatload of money, so that doesn't shock me, to be honest.
But still, no one is even close to that category.
Well, probably
maybe Kyle Dubas now, I guess, in Pittsburgh. Yeah, he'd be the closest one.
Right. Well, it'll be fascinating, because I think the Islanders are an organization, Frank, that in a different tier, they're one that needs to change their direction as well significantly. They've been going in the same direction with the same players for the last how many years, and it hasn't worked at all. Basically to a non-playoff extent of the Maple Leafs. Right? The Maple Leafs get to the playoffs, and then they don't get farther than they want. The Islanders never get to the playoffs anymore. They had their back-to-back conference finals during the COVID years, and since then they've been chasing that with basically the same group.
And what kind of process or what kind of say does Lou Lamoriello have in the process now? And what is that relationship like with Brendan Shanahan? Because they went back 40 years to the point where Shanahan was drafted. Shanahan brings him to Toronto for his first job outside of New Jersey. And then after his 3-year contract is up, says, yeah, sorry, we're going to have to let you go. We're turning the job over to Kyle Dubas. I don't think that went over that well. Could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it didn't.
Yeah. Usually, you voice your displeasure, and then you move on to a new one and say, hey, is this what's better for us moving forward now? So it would be fascinating to see if he goes there, and then who comes into Toronto and what the direction of the Leafs is. Because, the Leafs got some big decisions to make this offseason. There's no question about it.
Well, I think the big question is, do you even need another president? Do you just stick with Brad Treliving running the team and have Keith Pelley be the CEO that he reports to? I think depending on who it is, I just think the president position can be overrated.
Oh, yes, I would agree. Right, especially if
you're going to let's say he goes to Long Island, who's he hiring as the GM? Because he's not going to be the GM.
Yeah, like a president of hockey operations, a president, when you have a president of business operations, Frank, I think that's vitally important for an organization, right? Overseeing all the money, everything like that, sure. But kind of having a GM and a president, I've always wondered sometimes, why do you need both? Especially if you got multiple assistant GMs. Like, how many cooks do you really need?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that there's an important buffer that needs to be in place between the business side and the hockey operations side, someone that can
100%.
liaise.
Yes.
And I think, unfortunately, one of the big issues for being a general manager in this league is dealing with a lot of shit that has nothing to do with running your team.
Yeah.
You have to deal with HR and legal and staff budgets and equipment budgets and all sorts of stuff that really shouldn't be on your plate that you end up overseeing. This is going to sound bizarre. Scheduling preseason games, making sure that, hey, the equipment guy needs a new contract. What do we pay him? Like, all sorts of stuff that falls to them. That's like, this has nothing to do with evaluating talent, scouting talent, acquiring talent.
Yeah, the equipment guy's contract, I would say, like, you as a GM want to know who works well in your room, though. Do you not?
100%. But it's not about that. It's like, hey, he needs a raise. What do we pay him? And then there's like this like consternation of like, well, like the league average is this, and like this guy wants this. And it's like, it just becomes a time suck running and operating, doing those things that you otherwise don't need to do. And so that's not where the president comes in, because he ain't doing that. But I think there's a so then
that's your assistant GM, is it not?
Yeah, but some teams only have one, and some teams have three. And then the question is, if all these other things are getting delegated to the GM and the assistant GMs, what is the president doing? I'm not saying it's nothing. I'm just saying there needs to be a very clear delineation of work. And I just think the setup and style is fascinating.
Now let's move on to what happened on the ice last night. The Edmonton Oilers, after controlling the game for 40 minutes, just fell apart in the third period. Took some undisciplined penalties from some veterans. Their penalty kill couldn't stop anything. Didn't get a save when they needed a save. It was a meltdown by the Edmonton Oilers, as Leon Draisaitl said afterwards. We got to be more mature than that, right? And that's just true. Like, Corey Perry can't take that penalty. There's no reason to take that penalty in the offensive zone. And like I said it before, if they would have killed off the first power play to start, that ended, because what it was, 50 seconds left or a minute 10, whatever it was, to start the third. You get out of that, because Edmonton at 5-on-5 had been complete control of that game.
What was the more shocking loss on Wednesday night? Oilers up 2 in the third period, or New York Knicks up 14 with 2 minutes left?
Oh, it's the Knicks, buddy. Like, the stat that the Indiana Pacers, teams that trailed by 9 or more points in the final minute, were 1,414. All time. 0. Never happened before, ever. We've seen NHL teams blow a 2-goal lead before in the third period. So it's definitely the Knicks against the Pacers. And with Reggie Miller in the building, I'm sure Knicks fans were having flashbacks prior. Halliburton even he did the Reggie Miller choke, even though it was a little premature because it ended up being only a 2-pointer instead of a 3. But yeah, I would say that one's tougher. But the Edmonton Oilers, you're on the road, you're playing a very controlled game, and then you just self-destruct with undisciplined penalties and a bad penalty kill in 6 minutes. Frank, they gave up 3 goals in 6 minutes.
I would actually honestly argue with you and say that the way that it happened and how much Edmonton was dominating the game, it feels like that was the more shocking of the two results.
Nah, well, 9 points in a minute, dude. Come on.
Yeah, I get it. But like, I mean, I understand the stat that I'm arguing against, but it is still jaw-dropping that the Oilers gave up what they did and how they did it. They had no answer. They had no pushback, and they were dead in the water. Like,
their penalty kill, and it wasn't like it was a shooting gallery either. They just gave up good looks, right? One time, like the one Granlund shot, goalie has no chance on. The first goal of the third period, Janmark would tell you he's got to be in that shooting lane. It's right there. He kind of leans inside. If he leans to the outside, it probably hits him. Skinner's probably got to work a little bit harder to get around the screen on that goal. The fourth one, was there contact in front? Yeah, was Troy Stetcher tripped? I don't think so. I think it was probably just inadvertent contact, him and Wyatt Johnson. I thought their skates just clipped. I don't think that was a trip in front, and he fell, and now he can't cover Duchesne. But it was still the second rebound, and Skinner looked like he thought there was interference, and you can't quit on a play. You just can't. So there was a lot of things that went wrong, And, it started with some undisciplined penalties. You just, in a game that you're in complete control of, you basically just gave Dallas an opportunity to get back in the game.
So I've heard a lot of this. Let me ask you this before I give you what I think the take is. What is your level of concern for the Oilers coming out of the game 1 loss on a scale of 1 to 10?
Not much.
Okay.
Unless they're going to continue to be undisciplined.
Give me a number.
I'll say a 4 or 5.
And why?
Well, because I thought going in there, the faster team, they showed they're the faster team. At 5-on-5, they've been the better team in the playoffs in all their series. And if they can stay out of the penalty box, which for the most part they've done, and if you take aggressive penalties, Frank, I have no problem. If you got to trip a guy because he's on a breakaway, well, that's a good penalty, right? But you can't take an offensive cross-check in front of the net for no reason, right? When it's a 3-2 game. You just can't do that. And Corey Perry knows that, right? The guy tied Larry Robinson for 7th most playoff games last night. I think he knows, what to do in big games. But in that moment, Edmonton still, and every team has it, right? No one plays a perfect playoffs and doesn't have a stinker game here or there. But, last night I thought was one where Edmonton really, they just fell apart for 20 minutes. And so they'll go back and say, we got to play composed because Edmonton, all the numbers will even say they're the quicker team. They played faster. They looked in control, and then they just ran into penalty trouble. So stay out of the box, be disciplined, and I think they got a really good chance to be competitive.
My number is an 8, and I think anyone that sits back as an Edmonton Oiler fan today and says, oh, yeah, no big deal. We were the faster team, better team at 5-on-5 through 2 periods. Hey, don't sweat it. Just weird things happened. All good. 1, you gave away a game.
Yep.
And guess what? In the conference final, giving away a game is never a recipe for success. 2, if you think the Dallas Stars are going to play that poorly for the first 2 periods, the rest of the series, you've got another thing coming.
I don't know, man. I watched the Winnipeg at 5-on-5.
Dude.
The Jets were all over them for long stretches too. And Colorado, right? You look back at that Colorado series too.
Did you listen to Matt Duchene after the game?
Yeah.
He said we were garbage. And that's a Dallas Stars thing, not as much an Edmonton Oilers thing, in my view.
Yeah.
I don't think you're going to get 2 periods as bad as you just did from the Stars.
Well, I don't expect a team to dominate it. You're right. They're not going to dominate, but I don't think Edmonton looks in. To me, I have a concern of 8 when I play well and the other team still beats me. That's when I have a high concern. Right? Because you're they just beat us and we played exceptional and we lost. That's to me where you have a 8 after one game.
Right, but Dallas only needs to play marginally better, in my view, and they have a real chance to go to Edmonton up 2-0. That's the fact. That's where the Oilers are at right now.
Yeah, or Edmonton just has to play marginally more disciplined, and it's even, right? So all depends how you look at it.
Mm-hmm. I just think anyone sitting back and saying, "Oh, well, it's all good." Oilers, they could have been 9-1 in their last 10. Unbelievable run. Bound to have weird things happen at some point. A, Stuart Skinner showed a lot of his old self in that 3rd period. And B, the fact that the Oilers didn't have any pushback or answer when they were getting their doors blown off after the penalty kills were over, where once it becomes 4-3, why can't you then retake over the game?
Well, they did have chances after, right? They hit a goalpost. Brown hit the goalpost in front. Trent Frederick just was wide open and just fanned on a shot in front. I actually thought I didn't mind Edmonton's pushback again to create some chances, but
the numbers
I give Tyler Seguin
skewed to score effects once it was 4-3, 5-3.
Pardon?
I said the analytics, whatever you'd be looking at that point in time, would be heavily skewed to score effects because Dallas just packed it in once they were up.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't see much difference really. Edmonton had a few chances in the 3rd. I have to go back and look at when they were. But the problem for Edmonton was, Frank, for the first 7 minutes of the period, Dallas would score a power play goal. You'd have one shift that was okay. Then you take a penalty. Then you give up another goal, right?
But that's not what I was talking about. I was talking about after those ended, and then it became 4-3.
Yeah.
Or even when it becomes 3-3.
Well, it's 3-3, and then they took another stupid penalty.
Yeah, right. Okay, so then 4-3. Okay, now take over the game again.
Would you think Dallas controlled the game at 4-3?
Yeah, I mean, they kind of just iced it away after that.
I thought Edmonton, like I said, Edmonton had 3 really good chances, didn't bury any of them. The other thing though that I found interesting was how the coach played Lindell and Heiskanen together at times against McDavid. They ended up each having 10 minutes, some apart, but 3.5 together. And so, they switched that around.
It is a crime when you have a McDavid game like that and you don't come away with a win.
Yeah, he played well. I thought Draisaitl played really well.
Both of them. But a crime. It is a crime. A crime.
Yeah. Well,
you can't do it. You just can't give it away. You cannot do it. It's
I agree with you on that.
And that's the type of stuff that costs you. And this is going back to first round LA Kings. It was so clean in round 2. So clean and very impressive. But this is what costs you from winning a Stanley Cup. Games like that.
Mm-hmm. No, that's totally valid.
If you can come and get over it, overcome it. What if it is Florida in the Stanley Cup final again? You give away a game like that? Like, come on. That team smells blood in the water as good as anyone we've ever seen.
I'd like to know the stats on, I know they do game 1 overall in the playoffs, but I agree with you later in the playoffs when usually you have better teams right into the conference final. I'd love to know what the stat is on wins in game 1 and what that leads to percentage of the play in the winning the series. Is it still 69 or does it jump up significantly more? My gut would say it jumps up more, but I don't know that for sure. I'd like to go look. Might have to ask our buddies at the NHL because I do agree with you that giving away a game in a 7-game series when we think the teams are going to be pretty even, and then you end up losing in 7, is because you gave away the first game.
I do have it broken down by round. I'm going to see if I can find it.
Okay. Well, while you find that, we'll switch over to the Carolina. Actually, we'll bring in Ty first, and then we'll talk that number afterwards as we welcome Ty to the pod. Ty, how you doing?
I'm doing good, boys. Ready to go with a new edition of Buy or Sell, brought to you by Bet365, an official partner of the Stanley Cup playoffs. Want to get in on the action? At Bet365, they got you from player props, game props, totals, and money line. You can even bet on futures like series winners that are updated after every game. Download the app, get in on the game. Must be 19 or older. I was just going through. I was going to start going through the last few years, series by series here. And just by looking at the last 2 years, each of the teams that have won the conference finals in both, or game 1 of the conference finals in both 2023 and 2024 have gone on to win the series. So it's at least the last 4 times that the team has won game 1. They've gone on to win. But I got one. I don't really know how to spin this into a buy or sell, but it was floating around on Twitter X the other day. There's all these Finnish superstars or stars, you could say, playing in the conference finals. Barkov, Aho, Heiskanen, Rantanen, and Hintz as well. If you had to pick one to build a team around, who would you pick, Greg's? I guess who would you buy on is the way I'll phrase it.
Ooh, Barkov, Heiskanen. Yeah. Well, I'm probably going to build around a center or defenseman. If I pick him today, I would pick Heiskanen because he's younger. So I'll say Heiskanen.
Gets a bit of an edge over maybe Barkov. I think Barkov would be my pick because I like having that just workhorse centerman who can play every scenario for you. But I guess Heiskanen's out on the blue line. Frank, who would you pick?
Sorry, I missed the question. I'm looking up this stupid round by round stat. Jackass.
If you could build a franchise around one of the Finnish stars that are remaining in the playoffs, so Rantanen, Hintz, Barkov, Heiskanen, go through the list, Aho as well, who would you pick?
It's hard to. I think my order would be Barkov, Heiskanen, Rantanen. And I know that sounds blasphemous with the playoff run that Rantanen has had and all the oxygen we've spent on him this season alone. But Heiskanen, if he could just find a way to break through and be a 65 to 70 point defenseman, that's the only thing that's kept him out of the Norris Trophy conversation is he doesn't have the point totals to compete with the other guys that are in the 80s and 90s. He's arguably the second best pure defender in the league after Jacob Slavin. So I think he's an incredibly valuable piece.
Next one I got for you guys. Obviously, a lot of oxygen being used on Mitch Marner and John Tavares and their futures in Toronto. But Frank, when we had Matt Larkin on the Monday after the Leafs were eliminated, he brought up another interesting name and a guy who struggled, and it was Morgan Riley. He's not even halfway through that $7.5 million extension, but there is some talk about could Morgan Riley be moved on? Could the Leafs look for a different mix on their blue line? You buying or selling on the Leafs moving Morgan Riley this summer?
I'm buying certainly on the possibility, and I think it's a real conversation that needs to be had. He's been there longer than anyone. He's the only guy still left from 2013, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
Is that right?
Yep.
And at this point in time, two things stand out. He's not just lost one step, he's probably lost two. And the biggest complaint or issue about Morgan Riley's game is that he's not an effective PP1 quarterback. Now I'll add in a third thing, which is he's not going to age well. That deal is not going to age well. That term, it's not the dollar figure, it's the term. That's the problem. And so I think if the Leafs can find one team that has a significant need to upgrade their defense, I think you try and find a way to explore that. And even if you look a little bit weaker, or even if your roster isn't as complete next season, I think you look at next year as a year in transition. And you say, this is for the betterment of the overall of the Toronto Maple Leafs, that this is the decision that we need to make right here and now.
Greg's?
Well, it all depends. You still need high-end talent to win. And if you're going to get, if you're going to, lose Marner and maybe Tavares and Riley, I get that that's significant moves, but who are you replacing them with? Because if you're downgrading at all positions, your team's just not going to be as good. You need to make other moves. So if they want to move out Riley, sure. But then you've got to keep someone. You can't, I don't think, just get rid of, three of your top 5 or 6 players and think that you're going to be better. I think that would be a little bit delusional.
But here's, let me just push back against that. One, the word you used, high end. Morgan Riley to me is not high end. He's a middle tier defenseman. And two, opportunity cost. Everyone is so focused on what you're giving up. You cannot go out and make moves to get better unless you're willing to move off of players. Look, we just talked about him, but let's bring him up again. Rantanen and the Canes. If the Canes keep all the guys that were unrestricted free agents last summer, Pesce, Shea, go through everyone that walked out the door, there is a 0% chance that they can make a play to trade for Mikko Rantanen this season. They can't do it. They don't have the cap space. They don't have the ability. It takes being willing to say, hey, right here in the here and now, we are willing to admit that we may be 7, 8, 10 points worse than we were last season. But next season or the season beyond, we're going to be 20 points better. We're going to be a team that is better geared to compete for a Stanley Cup, because in the end, that's all that matters. Whether you have 115 points if you're the Leafs or you have 107, they've hit all those point totals in the last number of years. And guess what? It's meant absolutely jack shit.
Yeah, here I'm going to give you a stat, though, that might surprise people. And you say that Morgan Riley isn't high end. Did you know that in the last 3 playoffs, Morgan Riley has the second most points of any defenseman 5-on-5, having played only 31 games. At 5-on-5, he has the highest points per 60 of any defenseman who's played at least 400 minutes. And he's got the 5th highest goals for percentage, goals for, goals against. So Morgan Riley actually on the ice in the playoffs is one of the Toronto guys who's actually produced. That's why I would be hesitant to move him. When I got a bunch of guys who haven't, and I'm going to get rid of the one guy who maybe, looks a little bit slower, but he produces on a team that's best guys don't produce. So that's every defenseman over the last 3 years. He's got the highest points per 60 rate. And so that evens it out. And then he has the second most points behind only Evan Bouchard at 5-on-5.
That's
Okay.
interesting. I wouldn't have been able to guess that.
So
Go.
wait, but if you were to take all the defensemen in the league and you were to rank them 1 to, I don't know, 200, however many there are, where would he fall on the list?
That's a good question. I think he's probably in the top 30.
Okay.
So if you move out Morgan Riley, who are you replacing him with that's better is my question. There's no free agents, is there? It's a pretty slim free agent market this year.
But what my point is that he is diminishing returns. Getting out now before it's truly problematic is the time that makes sense to do it. Waiting another year or another 2 years and for him to be exposed further for his lack of foot speed, and he doesn't solve such a critical need when you have high-end offensive players. Like, look at their situational, usage of him. When it comes time to, when it's been crunch time, they haven't been afraid to be like, this is going back, but like, hey, Morgan Riley, you're off PP1, Rasmus Sandin, you're in. If he was effective at doing the job, it would have been locked down. I think he is a critical part of this offseason to answer the question. Either you're our guy and we're sticking with you and we're all in, or we're making a change.
Okay. The numbers will suggest that he's actually being quite productive. That's all I'm saying.
I think he's outside of 30 in your ranking, by the way.
The thing that
he's
will
probably closer to 50.
Thing that'll maybe help with the aging, not just on Riley, but on a lot of contracts like that. I mean, by 2027-28, the cap's $113 million, right? Like eventually $7.5 million will be what a lot of second pair defensemen kind of make, right, Frank? I mean, by this summer, I think you're looking at some guys who could get paid that to be second pairing D-men.
It's not the cap number. It's the term.
Yeah.
It's purely the term. It's not going to work.
All right, let's go to another Canadian team that got bounced. The Winnipeg Jets. Did you buy or sell? Just kind of, again, early on, we're 5 or 6 weeks, whatever, from free agency, but buy or sell on Nick Ehlers being back there. Greg's, I think it's your turn to go first.
Yeah, the Jets, everybody thought they were going to lose Scheifele and Hellebuck. I think they've built something there. I think, you heard Fleury raving about being in a market where cares. He goes, I want my son to be here. And, he's not a big name guy, but I think it's proven that a lot of the players, but now there's some who don't, that's fair, but a lot of the big guys have liked it there. Nikolai Ehlers, I think they actually missed him in the playoffs, right? Like he had 5 goals in the 8 games he played, right? Like he produced for them. And then, they had a lot of guys who don't. I think it comes down to the number for Nikolai Ehlers because he's a smaller winger with an injury history. And that to me is, I like Nick Ehlers, but he gets hurt lots. And so, the best ability is dependability, especially in the playoffs. And so that would be my one concern if I'm the Jets is, I pay this guy. We like him, but man, in crunch time, he's not healthy often enough.
Frank?
I think it's not so much up to the number. Not that it's not important because the Jets will, of course, have a ceiling for it. But I think it's up to Ehlers. Is it time to move on? You've had a great run. You've been with one team your whole career. You've gotten to this moment in time. You've heard his teammates lobbying for him after the season. They said, we know that he knows how much he means to us. So that is them basically... That's their ploy. That's their pitch for him to come back. I don't think it's really necessarily up to the Jets because they want him back, I think. I think it's more so up to Ehlers.
Yeah, because you look, since 21, they've played 31 playoff games. He's only dressed for 20. And that's a pretty big number, right? You're talking over 33% of the games missed. And he's a key piece. So I think when he's there, he shows up and he's a productive player. He's fast, he's gritty, doesn't shy away, right? So you like all of that, but it's just I wonder, is he a guy who he's already breaking down a bit? Does he break down even more? Right. So if the term would probably be the biggest key as to why I bring him back or not.
Sorry, I'm sitting over here salivating. Do you know how fun it would be to do like even a 15-minute segment on, okay, let's have the debate. Brett Kulak or Morgan Riley? Like you could go through all like every guy until you finally get to a point where you're like, okay, all right, he's properly slotted here. Because I think that conversation would be so fascinating because there are guys in the league that might not have 58 points or 50 points like Morgan Riley does, but I would pick them over Morgan Riley because of the way they play.
If there's ever anyone who questions how much you love talking hockey, Frank, you give them the quote, you know how much fun it would be to debate Morgan Riley over Brett Kulak?
But it's true. Like, so like I'm just scrolling down to see guys way further down the list. Matt Roy or Morgan Riley. This is all on points. Ryan Pulak or Morgan Riley. Like it would Jake Middleton or Morgan Riley. You don't even know how fun this debate would be. You really don't.
All right. I know you guys are going to keep talking playoffs. Just one thing from the futures tab over on Bet365. Remember, I told you guys, I think on the Monday episode, if you parlay the 2 series to each go over 5.5 games, it was plus 130. It's still plus 130. So it's interesting that after the game 1 results, the books aren't changing their kind of mind or their odds on both of these series to go deep and go 6 or 7 games. But that is a wrap on this week's edition of Buy or Sell, brought to you by Bet365.
Before you go, does Florida kind of controlling in a big way game 1 make you nervous at all that it could be a short series with Carolina?
I mean, if Carolina wins tonight, then no. Like, I don't know. As much as it sucks they lost home ice advantage, I still think they can win 2 games in this series.
Yeah. I mean,
even if you were to go down 2-0, like you win 1 in Florida, then you win game 5 at home, and you're forcing a game 6 at least, even if you're not winning the series. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dude, right. They're 0-13 in the conference final. Like winning 2 games out of their next 5 would be massive.
I think that's such a bullshit stat. I'm sorry.
Well, how about 0-9 under Rod Brind'Amour?
Okay, fine. Well, let's even go back to that season. Okay, I want to just count the number of players on the roster that are still there. Okay, let's see. Rod Brind'Amour as a coach, 2019 Carolina Hurricanes. So the guys that are still there are Aho.
Yeah. Jordan Staal.
Slavin. Martinook.
Yeah. Now, what about Freddie Anderson? Is he still there? He might be there. Yeah, they've changed lots of their team, but
there's 4 freaking guys left from 2019. 4.
It's an amazing
bullshit
stat.
Stop quoting it.
How is it bullshit? It's factual.
It's 4 guys that are left. They have nothing to do with that stat. Why should they wear it?
Okay, but is the organization the same when you look at the construction of their team?
Logo the same? Come on.
No. The construction of their team, Frank.
There's 4 guys left.
But is it not just
the team?
Is it similar team, different players?
No.
Do they play different?
I was at those games in 2019 conference final against the Bruins.
Yeah.
That team was happy to be there. They came kind of out of the clear blue sky to make it that far. They finished 4th in their own division that season. Okay. They were just happy. They were the new kids that were young. Aho and all those guys were so young. Aho was 21. That was a team that was like, hey, oh my God, this is great. The conference final. Oh my God. And then they got their doors blown off by a Boston team that was ready to win and got to the cup final and had a 3-2 series lead over the Blues and gagged it. So no, if you want to say to me that the Carolina Hurricanes, this iteration of it is now 0-5, I would say, sure. Yeah, there probably is they're still feeling some heat and hungry to win a conference final game. That's a closer facsimile to the team that we see now. But 0-13, you want to go back and start quoting games from 2000 and whatever before the salary cap or 2008? Come on. That's insane. That's truly insane. I'm sorry.
Okay, either way, they're 0-5 against the Panthers. They've scored a whopping 8 goals in the 5 games against the Panthers.
Okay, those are the games that I'm saying it's acceptable to quote. I'm saying going 0-13 back to 2008 when none of those guys are even still in the league is bananas.
No, but that's just the historical stat for a team. Like no franchise has ever lost 13 in a row in the conference final. It's kind of crazy. But under Rod Brind'Amour, they've lost 9. With this core group, now they've lost 5. So the way they lost that game, Frank. Now, I know that a few years ago, Rod was like, yeah, but you know what? those games, they were close. You know, they hey, whatever, you lose. And even if you lose close, you still lose. They didn't lose close in game 1.
No.
That to me, they got the doors blown off of them, and it was not close.
And that's the biggest concern that I would have moving forward is, as much of at times you think the Canes can narrow the gap, Florida's really, really good.
No, Florida bullied them in that game. Like, I thought they bullied them.
Yep. And then the Canes tried to play Florida's way a little bit, which was hugely problematic. They can't win that way.
What'd you make of Svechnikov's play? Were you surprised on because he kind of leaned right into Bob's head? Like, to me, we've seen some goalie contact that I think are hockey. That to me was one which is uncharacteristics of the Canes, and it showed their frustration. He leaned right into Bob and hit him squarely in the head.
That to me is, first off, a representative of another failure from the concussion spotter. Not only did he get drilled in the head, but then did the shake sign, which is 72% a predictor of a concussion.
Wow.
Hey, Anthony Stolarz, play on, vomiting on the bench. That's the only time he was pulled, is after he started vomiting on the bench. It was the same thing. Same contact, same reaction. And the only thing that was missing was the vomiting. And it's like, oh yeah, whatever, no problem. We just saw guys sustain a significant concussion that Stolarz revealed after the playoffs was indeed, in fact, that, and had nothing to do, he said, with the shot off of his mask, but all with Bennett's contact. And then Bob, I love, after the game, he goes, they were just trying to get me off my game. Not a big deal. It's the playoffs.
Yeah, he's very relaxed, but
100% on purpose.
Oh, 100% it was. And the Panthers, Frank, the one thing that I love about the Panthers, like Sam Bennett's press conference, I don't know if you saw it. And someone said, any more questions? And Paul Maurice is in the back, and he's like, no, because he wanted to get the press conference moving along. And Bennett's sitting there. He's got his hat pulled down. He looks like a serial killer in a good way. And all of a sudden he starts laughing, but his mouth is closed. And I'm like, this guy's a stone cold killer. Like Sam Bennett and Brad Marchand, you don't think someone's going after Svechnikov in a cheap but dirty, somewhat clean way tonight? Because that's how the Panthers are. Aaron Ekblad, they got a bunch of guys that aren't afraid to take retribution in their own hands. And I think, Frank, it might not be tonight, but at some point in this series, they're going to go after Svechnikov. Because I agree with you. That was totally blatant.
Yes. Good luck.
Yeah. And Carolina, they're not built. They don't have the guys. And that's, when I look at their team, they're the same team they've been for the last many years. They play incredibly disciplined system. They attack all that stuff. They don't have a superstar. Now, they tried to get one. It didn't work. Okay. But I think when the playoffs are over, Carolina, it's going to be the same story against them. Good team, not good enough. And I wonder, I know people will, people in Toronto be like, what the hell are you talking about? Do you think, now I know they tried to trade for him and he vetoed it. So does that mean there's no chance? Or do you think Carolina turns around and tries to get Marner, thinking that, hey, maybe Marner with some of our guys might have more success?
I just don't think Mitch Marner is signing in Carolina.
No. LA?
Maybe. Pittsburgh, maybe, with the connection.
Pittsburgh.
The general manager.
Yeah, well, and I guess you get the chance to play with Crosby, sure, but
well, if you're Pittsburgh, you're highly motivated to do that. It'd be the best player around Crosby in 10 years, with all due respect to Jake Gensel and Evgeny Malkin.
You think Marner's better than Gensel?
You don't?
Well, if you're saying Brett Kulak's better than Morgan Riley, then yeah, based on that argument.
What? Hold on, someone's gonna have to clip this. This is an I'm a huge Jake Gensel fan, but you think Jake Gensel is better than Mark? I mean, in a playoff performer, of course he is.
Well, that's my point.
If you're talking,
he's a different player.
Penguins, they got to get to the playoffs. They haven't gotten to the playoffs in years. That's the point about Marner and going somewhere, is that he helps you get to the playoffs.
Well, and here's the great question, Frank, is Marner and Gensel are totally very different players. Gensel's a shooter, Marner's a distributor, right? So it's hard to compare them. You look at their point totals. But then the question becomes, for me, and when I look at Mitch Marner, at a certain price point, I'm not sure. Like when people are talking
At a certain
13,
price point, I could see you making the argument that Gensel is the better value for sure.
yeah, and that's
I get it.
going to be my point here is somebody's going to pay Marner 13 or 14 million dollars, and you're getting a winger who doesn't score. He's got 13 goals in the playoffs. He's not a big goal scorer in the regular season, and that's okay. He's just never been that. But to me, if you're going to pay big
He's also
money
way
to players,
more impactful defensively than Gensel, though. And
sure.
he's a 2-time 30-goal scorer. Like, he gets to almost 30 pretty much every year and gets to 100 points. Like, I mean,
he's a 90-point player, and he's been to 30 twice. But my point is, he's not. When you look at the guys, Frank, that are making 11 plus around, outside of Toronto, Draisaitl, big time scorer, McKinnon, Rantanen, McDavid, like goal scorers, guys who score 40 goals, 50 goals, 60 goals, not 30 goals. That's all I'm saying. To me, I'm paying a winger to score me 30 goals, get me a lot of assists, great. But he's had a lot of assists playing with one of the best shooters in the game, right? There's not many teams he's going to go to get that. So maybe it'll continue. I just think when you talk value, like look at David Pastrnak, 50, 60 goal scorer, right? When I look at value, goals do matter more because you can finish it. And when you're a passer, you're still relying on the other guy to shoot it into the net. And a smaller winger at that price point, Frank, I think it's going to be hard for any team who signs him to get the value at 13 or 14. Because I just don't think straight up, if I'm comparing him to impact in the games to the other guys in that pay scale, I don't think he brings the same impact.
So so that's a fun conversation because when you talk about if you're a team and you're talking about value, right? Is it relative to other players in the league or is it relative to what he brings to your team? Because if you're an owner and Mitch Marner takes your team that hasn't been in the playoffs and gets you into the playoffs and you get 4 home gates or 8 home gates or whatever it is, didn't he just pay for himself?
Fair point. So
and that if you think to maybe just like this marketplace as a whole is answering the question for me and you about who's the better player, Gensel or Marner. If Marner's getting 13 and Gensel just went to market last summer and got 8.5, the market is telling you that the market thinks that Marner is a more impactful player by a wide margin. I'm not saying they're correct. I'm just telling you the market is telling you that that's a fact.
Yeah, well, I think Gensel got 9, didn't he? Right? I think, but either way, when I look at it's like
Gensel got 7 times 9. Sorry, it was originally 8 times 8.5, and then
the value of a player, it's like the value of your house. You can ask for a certain price; it's only worth what someone's willing to pay. And so all it takes is some guy to want to pay you a certain amount. We've seen players who get more. I've had agents say the last thing you want is your player to be overpaid, because then he has way more pressure in that market, regardless of the market. But I just look at it and say it's valid to say, hey, we're Utah, for instance, and we get Mitch Marner, and he comes in, and we make the playoffs. And our organization, I know it's only second year in Utah, but the history of the organization, they haven't made the playoffs in a long time, so that's good. We make some more money, great. But if I'm looking at that one thing, fair argument. But then if I look at value to if the ultimate goal is to win, do I think I can win with a guy making 13 mil who isn't a goal scorer and historically for the first 9 years of his career hasn't been decently productive, but not overly productive in some of the biggest games? Maybe he changes. We'll see. But to me, that's where it comes down to is to win in the regular season is one thing. To get there is great. But if your ultimate goal is to win, is he going to bring you the same impact and value? I don't believe he does compared to the other guys in that pay category of the 13, 14, $12 million players.
I don't think you're wrong. I'm just that's what the market's going to dictate. But like, let me throw another hypothetical at you. Let's say you're Anaheim and you've got a collection of forward players that you believe are pretty talented. Huge difference from Toronto. There's like basically zero pressure in Anaheim. You can live at the beach, have a blast, bunch of young guys that you help raise up and get better. I'd have a hard time saying that if he were to go there at that number and they take a huge step forward and go from being an 80-point team to a 95-point team and making the playoffs, It's not all going to be on his back because you'd have to make other changes, but that the value then would have been achieved or unlocked.
Well, see, Anaheim's a fascinating team to use, Frank, because when Toronto signed John Tavares, their younger players who were pretty good, they then got massive raises because they paid him so much. The guys in Anaheim are all under contract. Now, Trevor Zegras has 1 year left, but Troy Terry just signed. None
of those guys could hold Mitch Marner's jockstrap. No offense.
Yeah, no, but I look and say, what if Leo Carlsson goes out, hypothetically, Frank, as a young player, has Mitch Marner on his wing, and Leo Carlsson goes out and scores 80 points? Does now he suddenly jump up and he's like, well, geez, now I want $10 million. Right?
Okay, so this is gonna sound funny for me to say. That would be the best problem that the Anaheim Ducks could ever have.
Okay.
If what you're debating is like this guy had a rock star season as our next whoever, elite, Anze Kopitar, pick a guy in the league as a
but 1 year isn't. To me, it's multiple years, right? That's where I always am concerned by it. In Anaheim, I could see it. Joe Quenneville's the new coach, so you want another top end guy. I can understand it. You're right about.
I think you have to watch. I think you have to watch Vegas. You have to watch.
Well, Vegas for sure. Vegas doesn't. Vegas is the one competitive team, Frank, that I would put at the top of the list to go after Marner because they've never shied away from making a big splash, and I think Vegas would say to him, "Hey, you come here, but we're not paying you 13, but you're going to have a chance to win, and so you'll take 12." And I could see why. Like, why wouldn't he do that? Because why does he need to get that much money? It actually lowers the pressure. That's what's funny. If all this talk is that doesn't like the pressure, then take a little bit less money. It's $12 million a year. I'm pretty sure you can survive on it quite well.
Yeah. Well, then the next question would be, what are they going to have to pay Eichel?
Yeah. Well, he's already making 10, right? So Eichel's raise he'll be a raise, and even if it's 13, like it's not only, but it's a $3 million raise, right? Like it's not like he's jumping from 6 to 13.
Yeah. So I have a t-shirt sometimes that I wear. It's a Travis Matthews shirt, and it says "Puck Nerd." My son calls me, like, if I wear it, he just for like 3 days, he'll just call me, "Hey, Puck Nerd." But here's another fun Puck Nerd conversation. Is the Jack Eichel deal at 8 times 10 one of the best contracts of all time or one of the worst?
Well, they won a cup. So
yes. And they traded it, so it obviously wasn't prohibitive. But how many of those years did he actually live up to being a $10 million player?
And you know what?
2?
It's fascinating
3?
when you say that, Frank. You're right, because you'll see players and a lot of people in their analysis of a player, and he can make a lot of good plays, but if he makes a few big bad plays, oh God, that's what you remember him for, right? You remember him for the big bad plays, not the 100 really good plays. Jack Eichel, you're like, God, he won a cup, and he had a really good year last year, so yeah, that contract's pretty good. No, I think if you went on a year by year basis, there's more years that you got less value than you would expect for a $10 million player. However, you won a cup with him, and he had a really good year this year. And so you'll say, hey, it was worth it. Like for Vegas, I think it was worth it. I don't think it was worth it for Buffalo. And that might sound weird, but I think that's.
And it was also signed at a moment in time in Buffalo that, like, you put him in this echelon that so few players were at. That was like just on the heels of like the Kane and Taves and like all these other guys that got to $10 million. It's like, it's a long time ago.
Well, yeah, like wasn't the first year of his deal like 18, 19 or something? Maybe. Yeah, I think it was 1 year after McDavid's deal, right? Oh, no, maybe it's the same year. No, same year as McDavid. So yeah, McDavid came in at 12.
The same year.
Yeah, it's got to be 18, 19, right? 3 years in the league. So it's got to be 18, 19 when
he had 3 consecutive 25-goal seasons, essentially, in the high 50s, low 60s in points.
Yeah.
And then 18, 19. But he had signed the deal in October of 2017. So at that point, he only had 2 seasons under his belt of 25-goal seasons. And they said, here you go. Here's $80 million.
Yeah. Now he got it because McDavid, I think, had signed earlier that summer, right? McDavid signed like July 1st of 2017, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Yeah. After a 100-point season, made the playoffs. They're like, cha-ching, which was a pretty good contract.
Pretty good. Oh my God.
Yeah. I think
he signed July 5th, 2017.
July 5th.
I mean, it is a but it's a fun because like in the end, it didn't stop Buffalo from trading him. Vegas took on full boat. Then he goes and has had massive seasons in Vegas, and now he's due a raise on top of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Now for anybody wondering, he's got a year left in his deal, but can start negotiating on July 1st.
And he's going to be one of the big stories of the summer. Because then if you're bringing in Marner, you're paying him whatever, he's going to turn around and go, oh, you just gave Marner 12. My price is 13.5. I've actually won a cup, and I'm a center, and I'm a play driver, and I'm a Selke candidate. Hey, where's my dough?
Yeah. I'm not sold if he'll go there, but the Kings are a team. There's a lot of teams that are going to be interested in him, no question. I'm just curious, which means he probably ends up getting even more than he probably should if you're looking at straight value. So it'll be fun exercise.
Still probably a better player than Gensel.
Sure, not better value. Not a better.
I love it because Gensel is like, how many more clutch playoff players are there on the planet than Gensel? You're talking about two polar opposite guys.
Yeah, exactly. So to me,
I'm grinding your gears because this was a fun one.
Yeah. Frankie, have a great weekend. We will chat with you on Monday. That's the run. 365.
I was going to say, someone listening, please go rank all the defensemen and tell me where Morgan Riley lands.
But how about those playoff numbers? They're surprising. Hey, I think people like, honestly, when I looked it up, I was a little surprised. Highest points per 65 on 5 of any defenseman who's played 400 minutes in the playoffs the last few years. 3 years. That's not a bad sample size.
Also, it's the Leafs, so it's a limited sample size.
Hi-yo! We're out.
What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you need to be hitting the subscribe button right here at Daily Faceoff. Exclusive interviews and analysis from our hockey insider Frank Seravalli, fantasy updates from Brock Sagan, and a daily live show at noon Eastern, Monday through Friday. You don't want to miss any of the fantastic content, so hit that subscribe button.